Michael in English. Each time the guru sat for worship with his students, the ashram cat would come in to distract them. So he ordered them to tie the cat to a tree when the ashram was at prayer. After the guru died, the cat continued to be tied to the same tree at worship time. And when the cat died, and when the tree died, another cat was brought into the ashram, and another tree was planted to make sure that the guru's orders were faithfully observed at worship time. Centuries passed, and learned treatises were written by the guru's scholarly disciples on the liturgical significance of tying up a sacred cat to a sacred tree while worship is performed. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry once wrote, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea." Chapter 9 of Matthew's Gospel. Then the disciples of John approached him and said, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not?" Jesus answered them, "Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one patches old cloak with the piece of unshrunken cloth, for its fullness pulls away from the cloak, and the tear gets worse. People do not put new wine in old wineskins. Otherwise, the skins burst, the wine spills out, and the skins are ruined. Rather, they pour new wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved." My dear brothers, gathered from all regions of our Franciscan world here in Konstantin, Poland, may the Lord give you his peace. On behalf of the General Definitus and of all the friars in service to the order at the General Curia, I wish to express gratitude to God for the gift of the gospel, the person of Jesus, who through the incarnation has united himself with us, and through our Forma Vitae proposed by Father Francis, invites us to follow him as disciples and lesser brothers on the journey of faith. It is this gift of the gospel which is at the origin of our vocation and our fraternity. I also give thanks to God for the gift of brothers, for each of you present here at this plenary council, and also for all the brothers of the universal and single fraternity of the Order of Friars Minor, to which we belong through our religious profession. The guiding priorities of our gospel brotherhood. The central responsibility of all friars of the order, and in a special way all ministers, is to constantly remind one another of the nature of our calling and identity as friars minor, who seek to make the gospel, with all of its demands, the foundation of our daily life and the primary and ultimate criteria for our acting, thus allowing the logic and attitude of Jesus to become our own. We are by baptism men of faith, rooted in an intimate and dynamic relationship with the Lord Jesus. Through our religious profession, we respond to the gift of God's calling in obedience without anything of our own and in chastity, as expressed in our rule and general constitutions. We live out our religious profession first and foremost within the context of fraternity, the sharing of our lives with other brothers who have made the same commitment, who hunger and thirst for communion with the living God and communion with others, the brothers. Our fraternity becomes a springboard for us lesser brothers, opening ourselves and our fraternities to the promptings of the Spirit, who moves us to go out to what Pope Francis calls the existential peripheries, which involve the mystery of sin, of injustice, of ignorance, and of the absence of faith, of thought, and of every form of misery. Our call is to share good news that we first have received in the heart, that we have accepted, and in which we have placed all of our hope, and which we share together as brothers who are in communion of mind and heart. In our specifically Franciscan manner, we are called to share this good news, placing ourselves in a particular way at the service of the poor, the marginalized, immigrants, those suffering all forms of injustice and misery, the existential peripheries, going out 2 by 2 as an act of common, shared faith and mission. Thus, our radical commitment to the gospel, our recognition of the gift of our brothers, our embrace of a life without property, prepares us for the evangelizing mission that God is entrusting to us and which we undertake in the spirit of evangelical minority and itineracy. We must look for new ways to undertake the mission of the order at all levels, accentuating the communal nature of our mission. One of the central themes in the life and writing of Francis has to do with the gift of brothers. We know this. For Francis, the brother, and therefore the fraternity, were both gift and grace in the salvific event of the holy, loved, agreeable, humble, and pacific brother Jesus Christ, as Francis tells us in his letter to the faithful. The brother, therefore, is a gift of the Lord in him, to whom he gives himself and is present. For us brothers of the gospel life, the gift of fraternity is the locus privilegiatus, in and through which God works his miracles. Fraternity is our way of being in the world and in the church. It is both gift and hard work. The fraternity is received, but also is constructed. It is clear in the regula non volata and also in the approved rule, in the Testament, the admonitions, and elsewhere in the writings of Francis, that the brothers are recognized as gifts from God. They also are gifts to and for one another and the world. Through our gospel calling and religious profession, we all share in the one united, universal family or brotherhood. It is becoming clearer to many of us friars in the order that there is a tension between our identities as members of the universal brotherhood and that of our belonging to a specific entity of the order, namely to a province, a custody, or foundation. This tension is probably necessary and is not necessarily bad in itself. All of us need to develop a strong sense of belonging. We need a mooring or a way to anchor our lives, to place trust in an institution and a group of people we believe can help us achieve that to which God is calling us. However, when a specific entity closes in upon itself, when a province, custody, or foundation loses its sense of the universal brotherhood to which we have made our religious profession, when it no longer cultivates an awareness of and commitment to evangelizing mission, this can lead to a weakening or deformation of our Franciscan and ecclesial identity. If our identity is rooted in God, and if our fraternities are spaces for promoting integral human development, the development of the person and of the community of persons, the brothers, as a response to God's grace, we will necessarily be led by the Spirit of God to open our individual lives, our local fraternities, our provinces, or custodies, or foundations, through the divine operation of God at the level of the universal brotherhood of the order. This tendency or temptation to close in upon ourselves, a temptation that is all too common in religious life and in the church, can lead to the domestication of the gospel, stripping it of its charismatic intuition of Francis, and its power to transform our lives. The charismatic intuition, the space for a certain evangelical creativity that both respects but also defies form and structure, must always find a place and a voice within our gospel brotherhood because of its capacity to provoke crises, a breach in the wall of any possible complacency, and the movement towards simple adherence to the status quo. The charismatic intuition will always and necessarily be present if our lives are open to the action of the Spirit of God, and if we live in an attitude or in a position of constant discernment of God's movement within our order, the church, and the world. This does not negate in any way the wonders God is performing in and through the ordinary life and missionary activities of the friars in our entities and in the order. We believe and trust that God is working in our midst, and in the midst of our current structures, and in the lives of those who have been called to specific service in governance and animation, within the order, and also in our service to the people of God. In the recent sociological study of the order, the questionnaire completed by 1,408 brothers of the Universal Fraternity, the results of which will be presented later in the course of this plenary council, there reveals a growing concern among the friars regarding the capacity of current structures and the roles of ministry and service as exercised by the brothers of the order to carry forward animation that is effective and that actually generates life, passion for the gospel, and communion among brothers, communion also with the church and the world. A majority of brothers responding to the questionnaire indicated that the way we exercise the ministry of service, of authority within the life of the order, does not always help promote a deeper experience of faith, of communion with God and with the brothers, a sense of trust and confidence among the brothers for the sharing of life, sharing of struggles and crises, of joys, successes, and hope, and the cultivation of a missionary zeal and ardor. Although the specifics of Mandate 45 of the 2009 General Chapter indicate that the plenary council is to elaborate norms for the number and method of election of the general definitors that will take effect ad experimentum at the general chapter of 2015. This task must be placed within the larger context of the study of the government of the order, the situation of the order today, Mandate 14, the reality of ongoing reorganizing and restructuring of provinces, Mandate 47, with direct consequences for the future of conferences, and the study of departures from the order, Mandate 48. The world is changing as a consequence of the complexities identified under the umbrella terms of globalization and secularization. The church is changing, which Pope Francis seems keen to recognize, and for which he has created a special C8 Commission of Cardinals to examine current structures and roles within the church and to prepare for the necessary rethinking and restructuring of offices and roles in order to ensure that these are at the service of the gospel and of God's people. As Pope Francis said in an interview on March 28, 2013, the church, when it is self-referential, without realizing it, thinks that it has its own light. It stops being the mysterium lune and gives rise to the evil which is so grave, that of spiritual worldliness, that of living to give glory to oneself. To simplify, there are two images of the church, the Pope goes on. The evangelizing church that goes out from itself, and that of the worldly church that lives in itself, of itself, and for itself. This should illuminate possible changes and reforms to be realized for the salvation of souls, the Pope concludes. Likewise, within the order, there is need for us to change the way we think about our identity as members of the universal brotherhood, even as we respect the principle that the basic unit of life and mission of the order is the province, to custody the foundation. There also is urgent need for us to reflect seriously on the different structures and roles of service, Minister General and Vicar General, Definitors General, Minister Provincial and Vicar Provincial, Provincial Definitors, Custos and Vice Custos, Discreets, Presidents of Foundations, Presidents of Conferences, all of which have been created to help promote the living out of our charism in a manner that is both faithful and creative. These structures and ministries are meant to ensure that animation within the order is carried out in a manner that promotes greater communication, collaboration, co-responsibility, creativity, and communion among the brothers at the level of the singular entities and within the entire order. They are not meant to authorize an exercise of power and dominance over the brothers that is neither evangelical nor charitable. As the instruction on the service of authority and obedience, Faciem Tuum Domine Requiram, from the Congregation of the Institutes for Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, 2008, tells us, quoting Pope Benedict XVI, "My real program of governance is not to do my own will, not to pursue my ideas, but to listen together with the whole church to the world and the will of God, to be guided by him so that he himself will lead the church at this hour of our history." The document adds that all members of the order, congregation, or institute must sharpen his or her ability or capacity to understand and the exercise of authority as one of searching together the will of God for the full and integral development of all of the members of the community, having the same attitude as Jesus the servant, who washes the feet of his disciples so that they might share fully in his love and in his mission. If religious superiors, if brother ministers can keep at the center of all exercise of authority the humble search for God's will and the promotion of communion among the members, authority and obedience will be experienced in their complementary ways, each contributing to the full spiritual development of the singular members, each brother, and also of the fraternity, the entity, and the order. Authority, when exercised evangelically, should lead us to a greater understanding and practice of listening, to a greater experience of minoritas, and to the development of a greater participation of all friars in the life, the common life, that we are all responsible for one another, that we are all responsible for the life of the fraternity, the entity, and the order. This plenary council should benefit from the current work of the various commissions and services within the order, dealing with questions related to identity and organization, responding to the mandates of the 2009 chapter that are the specific competence of this gathering, but must do so always within the larger context and with a view towards promoting a more dynamic, flexible, and simpler manner of governance and exercise of evangelical authority as service within the life of the order at all levels. The gospel text, which serves as the sub-theme for our plenary council, New Wine, New Wineskins, is taken from the Gospel of St. Matthew. As you will recall, Matthew presents Jesus as the new Moses, who comes not to abolish the law and all its practices of the Jewish religious tradition, but rather to fulfill them. Jesus' new mandate for life with God is found in the Beatitudes, where the human person is placed at the center of all religious activity. Religious institutions and practices are created in order to lead believers to an experience of the mercy of God. This does not diminish the importance of institutions, nor does it mean that all institutions and practices are equal and therefore can be equally dismissed at random. What it does mean is that structures and practices, if they are divinely rooted and ordered, will themselves allow for flexibility and adaptability because of their function within the church and the order, responding to changing realities and yet remaining faithful to divine intention. Again, quoting Pope Francis, in his understanding, his reading of the gospel text of Matthew 9:17 on new wine, new wineskins, says the following: in the Christian life, even the life of the church, there are old structures, passing structures. It is necessary to renew them. And the church has always been attentive to this, with dialogue with cultures. It always allows itself to be renewed according to places, times, and persons. And so the church goes forward, giving space to the Holy Spirit that renews these structures, structures of the churches. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of the newness of the gospel. Don't be afraid of the newness that the Holy Spirit works in us. Don't be afraid of the renewal of structures. The end of the citation from the Pope. New wine, new wineskins. With regard to the life of the order, structures and practices have been created and adapted throughout the history of the Franciscan movement precisely to ensure that we might enter into a constant process of discernment, to review seriously our mission, and to dare to experiment with uncharted paths of presence and witness. This process of discernment, to which we are called, will necessarily require of us that we review the current situation of the order, take seriously the challenges of numerical decline and aging in large number of entities, while also recognizing growth and physical vitality in the emerging regions of the order, including Africa and Asia. The challenge, as I see it, is not whether we have the wisdom and courage to make certain necessary changes and adaptations to existing structures and practices related to organization, governance, and animation of the order at the various levels, the provinces, custodies, foundations, conferences, and super conferences. Historically, we have shown that we friars minor are capable of dreaming new dreams and creating new and more effective structures that help ensure the starting point and center of the gospel project, living the gospel in different historical moments and cultural contexts, restoring the gospel in ways that are intelligible and that draw people to God, and refounding our presences by undertaking difficult but essential processes of restructuring and or initiating new missionary endeavors. These serve as the guiding principles for the way we organize our gospel brotherhood. However, there is a much deeper process of restructuring that must take place, one that deals with the conversion of minds and hearts, the restructuring of each of us friars minor, allowing the Spirit of God to lead us on a path of constant conversion. We hear Yahweh speaking through the prophet Hosea, chapter 6, I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. This same theme of the call to conversion that is to guide our prayers, discernment, and decisions these days is also found in the document of the order entitled Starting Afresh from the Gospel, where we read, all this entails a revitalization from within, a deep conversion to the gospel and the form of life we have embraced by profession. Only in this way will we be able to devise structures adapted to present situations, which, from a dynamic faithfulness to our origins, will enable us to be challenging, to ask questions of the men and women of today, and to propose to them a vocation that is thoroughly convincing. Thus, perhaps the first and more difficult task of this plenary council, and that of the upcoming General Chapter 2015, and of the entire order, is nothing other than opening our hearts to what God wishes to speak, allowing God to transform us within, and allowing the transformative power of God also to transform the quality of communion we share in fraternity, the simplification of our lives for the sake of the kingdom, our willingness to become more agile and mobile, responding to the needs of God's people in freedom and with overwhelming justice and charity, and employing structures, the exercise of authority as a means for creating fraternities, custodies, provinces, and an order that promotes discernment, service, and co-responsibility in the fulfillment of our gospel vocation. In these ways, we are able to further ensure that our institutions and practices serve for the strengthening of identity, fraternity, minority, and simplicity of life, reflective of God's justice and peace, missionary evangelization, and the ongoing experience of conversion, the famous 5 priorities. Changes of composition of entities within the order as a result of revisioning and restructuring are taking place. In recent years, a number of entities within the order have initiated, are continuing, or have completed processes of revisioning and restructuring that are changing the map of the order. previously existing provinces, custodies, and the foundations have merged with other entities in order to strengthen all aspects of our Franciscan identity, fraternity, and missionary activity. Germany, which previously had 4 provinces, now has 1 united province. The former province of St. Joseph in Belgium is now a dependent custody on the province in the Netherlands. 6 provinces and 1 foundation in Spain are preparing for unification in January 2015, leaving in their wake a regional conference that will have only 4 entities, but that will also have more than 800 friars. Northern Italy, its 6 provinces, will merge in 2016 to form 1 province, and at that time will have more than 650 members. The United States, with 7 provinces and more than 1,100 friars, is undergoing a process of review to ensure the vitality and future presence of the Franciscan order and charism in that region. This process could lead to restructuring and the possible reduction in the number of provinces. Canada has initiated a similar process of dialogue between the 2 provinces, a process that at some point might need to involve all of the different OFM presences in the territories of Canada. CONASUD is also undergoing restructuring and merging, and this will also change their status as a conference. Brazil, and the list goes on, where changes are taking place within the order. At the heart of these processes, we must keep our focus on the inner conversion to which we are called, so that any future structures will reflect who we are seeking to become in the Christ. In all of these necessary processes and other changes taking place within the order, there are sometimes tremendous movements of resistance. Brothers do not want to lose the identity they currently have inherited or created. They do not want to let go of the vision and practice of Franciscan life they believe to be holy, good, true, and absolutely necessary, or else simply convenient. This also is true at the levels of all the entities of the order, the level of the conferences, and also the level of the general government. But we all recognize that the world and the church, as I have said earlier, are changing. Any changes that we undertake as an order must necessarily involve much prayer and discernment, and should not be taken simply to make our lives more efficient and effective. They are taken out of a sincere desire to promote our common gospel commitment and to ensure that our lives as friars minor remain capable of receiving God's invitation and to move when and where the Spirit of God is leading us. Redimensioning and restructuring in the life of the order is not only a response to diminishment, aging, and the desire to ensure a vital Franciscan presence for future generations in a given region. In India, the Philippines, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Eastern and Southern Africa, the former Africa Project, and in other parts of the Franciscan world, numerical growth and the youthfulness of the order find full expression. New entities are being forged in response to the numerical increase of friars and the need for structures that ensure quality of life, quality of the service of authority, and of dynamic evangelizing mission. At the same time, these new entities should learn from past errors committed on the part of founding provinces, be they missionary or local. They must strive to keep themselves open to all forms of collaboration and cooperation with other entities of the order as a natural part of our identity, especially from the entities out of which they are being formed. These new entities must undertake the difficult task of updating their way of understanding authority and structures, reflecting an evolving understanding within the church and the order on the purpose and manner of the exercising of authority as a practice of justice, truth, service, and love. The new entities must strive not to simply duplicate received understandings and practices, but must commit to undertaking the arduous task of organizing structures and roles of authority, making sure that these find resonance within the cultural world where they will be exercised. In this way, there also can take place the development of a healthy and creative inculturation of the core principles guiding our life. On a practical level, as new entities form and as older entities merge or change, there is urgent need to develop a strong sense of universal brotherhood. There is need for the forging of a new evangelical sense of solidarity, the sharing of human and material resources. There is need for the development of greater mechanisms for transparency and responsible management of human and natural resources. These become essential ingredients in the development of new models for leadership, service, the exercise of authority that is relational, and the creation and recreation of the very structures of the order that might be capable of transmitting our identity in the life of the order, the church, and the world in a particular way, in a way that is evangelical at this particular historical moment. Change at one level of life of the brothers and the order necessarily has consequences on all other brothers and on the brotherhood at all levels, at the level of the local entity, the conference, the super conference, and the worldwide order. We have become a global reality. At the level of the provinces, a new spirit of the universal identity of our Franciscan vocation and mission is slowly taking root. The results of the sociological study and the questionnaire reveal a growing desire among the brothers for the strengthening of bonds of solidarity, interprovincial collaboration in all areas of our lives, the breaking down of barriers that keep us from moving more freely and also responsibly between different entities, and to be at the service of the worldwide order for missionary projects that have been approved by the highest authority of the order, the General Chapter. At the level of the conferences, which are constituted according to a minimum number of 5 entities according to our general statutes, changes in the geography of provinces and independent and custodies also affect the conferences, and according to our legislation, call into question their legitimacy. New thinking will be required if we are to continue to make ever more effective use of the structures of the conferences and of the super conferences, which have as their primary objective the promotion of unity, coordination, and collaboration in the life and the mission of the order. It is clear within the general statutes of the order that all of our structures are organized and oriented toward the highest level of the common good, the universal brotherhood. All who serve the order at the universal level are aware that their primary responsibility is for the entire order, even as they strive to respond to specific needs and help the ministers within a given region to carry forward the service of animation and guarantee communication and communion between regions, within the conferences, and with the central government of the order. One other area of renewed interest in the order is the question of who can exercise major offices, namely the office of Minister General, Vicar General, Minister Provincial, Vicar Provincial, Custos of Custodies. Under the current legislation of canon law and the general constitutions of and general statutes of the order, only those brothers who have sacred orders can exercise ordinary jurisdiction over ordained friars, priests, and deacons. Since the Church counts us, the Church counts us as among the clerical institutes, while the Church recognizes that all friars are completely equal in their religious rights and obligations, the exception applies to a specific set of religious rights and obligations for those that arise from sacred orders. Our order, together with the Capuchins and also with the conventuals, have taken up this matter with the Holy See on various occasions, but have never received any response other than currently existing law. The General Definitorium has recently discussed this matter and has initiated a dialogue with our Franciscan Archbishop, His Excellency Jose Rodriguez Caballo, our former Minister General. These discussions will continue. We also have initiated a review of the Church's legislation, its history, previous efforts undertaken to explore possible changes that would allow for the election of lay friars to major offices. The fact you will recognize during this plenary council, the fact that we have 4 lay brothers, lay friars, as full participants and voting members in this meeting that we have gathered here, it was a decision that was made with purpose by the General Definitorium. We know that we were going to talk about changes affecting the future of the order. It was important that the presence of lay brothers, lay friars, be here, that they vote accordingly together with the entire order as we set a new course for the future. Obviously, other discussions that need to be had are not within our competence, the competence of the order at this time. We respect the Church's law and legislation as we will continue to ask perhaps that the Church reflect and that the commission that was set up, that was promised, and that has, I don't know exactly what work has been done, but the commission that was set up in 1996 by Blessed John Paul II in his letter on Vita Consecrata, he talked about the new commission that will be set up to establish or to examine this issue, and that it would report at some point on the findings. To my knowledge, we do not yet have any report for those findings. We should not, we must continue with the Capuchins, the conventuals, and TOR. We will continue to ask questions and request a review that the commission might be able to do its work. This should not, however, in any way impede us as an order from continuing to create and propose new ways to promote the dignity and equality of all brothers in the order, seeking always to allow the Spirit to transform our minds and our hearts. The renewed embrace and practice of the central values of our identity as Friars Minor should serve as the guiding principles for the organization of all structures and services which we might deem as absolutely essential for the living out of our vocation as consecrated religious in the Church and in the world today. As such, the structures should fully reflect and be placed at the service of a quality of gospel life, which clarify and justify our way of acting, our way of living in fraternity, and our caring for the evangelizing mission of the Church and the order today. As the opening words of the Instrumentum Laboris of this plenary council of the order remind us, we live our vocation as Friars Minor with the help of the fraternal structures of the order, structures that not only have meaning inasmuch as they are intended for the sake of the integral vocational animation of all the friars, and for the ecclesial service to which we have been called. The Plenary Council has as its principal theme and task the examination of the results of the detailed study undertaken by the International Commission, and with the participation of the entities and the conferences on the general government. It will reflect and deliberate on the number and method of election of the General Definitus. The decisions made regarding the number and method of election of the General Definitus will go into effect ad experimento at the General Chapter of 2015. 2 additional sub-themes will be examined these days, namely the structures and the situation of the order today and the challenge of friars abandoning our Franciscan life. And yet underneath And around these themes and sub-themes are larger questions related to our common life and our prophetic witness in the world today. As we read in the final paragraph of the Instrumentum Laboris, the criterion that could helpfully accompany the work of the Plenary Council of the Order will be the conviction that more than one change is needed within the Order because the world is changing. One cannot pretend to remain immobile and inert amidst the fast changes, which are a sign of our times. Such immobilism would be a substantial infidelity to our vocation, hidden under the mask of continuity with the past. The change that is being requested today is moving in the direction of reduction, simplification, and streamlining of structures which are at the service of our life. Only a view of the Order in its entirety might help us might give the right balance to each part and can make evident the value of the diverse structures. By way of conclusion, I leave for your consideration the following two questions. The first question: in what ways might our understanding of the essential and universally binding values of our Franciscan identity help us to rethink the current structures of the Order at all levels so that they might respond more effectively to the needs of Franciscan life today? And the second question: how might we deepen a reflection on the nature and practice of roles of authority so as to promote a greater sense of co-responsibility, participation, collaboration, communication, and creativity within the lives of the local fraternities at the level of provinces, custodies, foundations, conferences, and at the worldwide level of the Order? What essential themes should be included in such a discussion? What tools might we use to carry forward this reflection? May God bless the work of all of us gathered here at this plenary council, and bless also the life and witness of all of the brothers of the Order. Thank you for the work you and the conferences and individual entities in the Order have done in preparation for this plenary council. This pre-plenary council work is important and should help deepen our reflections and open us to listening and to following the Spirit of God that will lead us these days to a renewal of all the structures of the Order so that we might renew together the lives of our brothers. May all we do be guided by the Spirit of God and by an openness of hearts and minds to holy newness, new wine, new wineskins. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your